Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we are jumping headfirst into Robert Greene's incredible book, The Laws of Human Nature. This isn't just a casual read, it's a deep dive into the code that runs all of us, why people do the things they do, and maybe more importantly, how you can navigate this crazy complex world of human behavior.
And right off the bat, Greene hits us with this really stark warning. You'd think, with all our amazing technology and progress, we'd be past our more primitive instincts. But he argues it's actually the opposite. Things like social media and our virtual lives are acting like a giant magnifying glass for our most basic, emotional, and sometimes destructive impulses.
So that's really the big question we're tackling here. Are we just unknowingly fueling the fire of our own worst tendencies? And if we are, how in the world do we stop ourselves from getting burned?
Okay, so if we're playing with fire, the very first thing we have to do is understand the fuel. What is it about us that makes us so vulnerable to these primal urges in the first place?
Well, Greene says our biggest blind spot is our own irrationality. We are fantastic at spotting it in other people, right? But we are almost completely blind to how much our own feelings and emotions are actually pulling the strings on our decisions.
Now, to really see this in action, Greene takes us way back to the 1720s to this absolutely insane financial crash called the South Sea Bubble. And this wasn't just a few people making bad bets, this was an entire society going into a state of collective madness.
And here's the wild part. Look who got sucked in. It was literally everyone. You had farmers selling off everything they owned, you had high society, and get this, you even had Sir Isaac Newton. Yes, the guy who figured out gravity, probably the most brilliant mind of his entire generation, got completely swept up in the mania.
So the story goes, Newton invested early, made a tidy profit, and cashed out. Smart, right? But then he watched his friends keep getting richer and richer, and the FOMO got to him. He jumped back in, bigger than ever. And when the bubble inevitably burst, he lost a staggering 20,000 pounds, which is millions in today's money. It's the perfect and painful lesson that even genius-level intelligence is no match for the pull of the herd.
So what is going on here? How does an entire society, including its absolute brightest, just lose its collective mind? Well, Greene has a name for this phenomenon. He calls it high-grade irrationality. Basically, it's what happens when a really intense emotion, like greed in a bubble or fear in a panic, gets triggered and completely hijacks our thinking brain. We stop being rational, we start seeing everything through that one emotional filter. And that, right there, is the engine behind so many crises and just plain terrible decisions.
Okay, so we've established that we're all susceptible to this. It's part of our wiring. So how do we defend against it? The first step is getting way better at seeing what's really going on with other people. Not just the performance they're putting on, but who they truly are underneath it all.
I absolutely love this quote from Schopenhauer, because it just nails the idea of the social mask, doesn't it? Everyone we meet, everyone is showing you a carefully prepared version of themselves. They're showing you their good side, their polished side.
So this is the key skill, learning to tell the difference between the persona and the character. The persona is that crafted public image, but the character is what leaks out. It's what you see when someone's under pressure or when they're stressed or when they think no one's really watching. That's when the truth comes out.
Let me give you a quick, perfect example. Back in 1969, a guy named Jeb Magruder is interviewing for a top job in the Nixon White House. He meets with the chief of staff, Bob Haldeman. And in that interview, Haldeman is the total package. He's calm, sharp, professional. A perfect persona.
But just moments later, a tiny thing goes wrong. A golf cart isn't where it's supposed to be. And Haldeman's mask doesn't just slip, it shatters. He absolutely explodes, becoming, in Magruder's words, almost hysterical. He's vicious, screaming at a junior staffer. In that moment, Magruder saw a flash of Haldeman's true character, the anger, the need for control. He ignored it, and later came to deeply regret it during the whole Watergate scandal. The takeaway? The little things are never.
All right, so seeing behind other people's masks, that's a superpower. But you know it's even harder and way more important? Turning that lens around and learning to master our own nature.
Let's talk about the legendary actress Joan Crawford. Her childhood was just a nightmare. We're talking poverty, abuse, abandonment. It left her with these really deep emotional wounds. She was fragile, hypersensitive, and desperately needed approval. In a brutal place like old Hollywood, those kinds of weaknesses should have been a career death sentence.
But here's what she did, and it was brilliant. First, she looked her flaws right in the eye. No excuses. Second, she didn't just fight them, she reframed them.
She took all that real-life pain and poured it into her characters on screen, which made them incredibly compelling. And third, she turned her weaknesses outward. That hypersensitivity, she turned it into a radar, allowing her to sense exactly what her directors and co-stars needed. She didn't just overcome her flaws, she turned them into the very engine of a legendary 40-year career.
And that brings us to what might be the most profound law in the whole book, finding true internal freedom. And it all starts by facing the patterns that were handed down to us from our past.
The story of the great writer Anton Chekhov is just incredible. When he was just 16, his family fled their town to escape debt, and they left him behind to work and fend for himself. His father had been a cruel, bitter man, and Chekhov basically grew up in a climate of pain.
Now here's the crucial part, the pattern. See, Chekhov's grandfather had literally been a serf, which is a kind of slave. He worked his whole life to buy his family's freedom. But his son, Chekhov's father, remained what Greene calls a serf at heart. He was technically free, but his mind was still in chains. He was filled with bitterness and rage. And as a young man, Chekhov looked at himself and his brothers and had this horrifying realization. They were stuck in the exact same loop, feeling worthless and angry.
And this is where everything changes. Alone, forced to reflect, Chekhov had a breakthrough. He realized that real freedom wasn't about hating his father or running away from his past. Real freedom came from understanding him. He started to see his father not as a monster, but as another victim, trapped in a cycle of history. And in that one moment of compassion, of empathy, the cycle broke.
Years later, he wrote this absolutely stunning line, which basically sums up his entire journey, squeezing the slave out of himself, drop by drop. That, right there, is the ultimate goal Greene is pointing to do the hard work of self-reflection until we are truly, authentically free.
So at the end of the day, why does any of this matter? Why go through all this trouble? Because understanding these laws isn't just some academic exercise. It is a tool for freedom. Freedom from your own self-destructive knee-jerk reactions, and freedom from the people who will happily use your ignorance of human nature against you.
Because after we've looked at everyone else, after we've analyzed history and the people around us, the final, most important question isn't about them. It's about you. How well do you really know the person who's there when the mask comes off?